Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome officially. My name is Amy Morris-Jones, and I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator at the White Lake Community Library, and we're glad to have you here tonight. It's been a challenging year for all of us in terms of managing what the world has thrown at us, and we are pleased to have Norm Kittleson with us tonight, who is going to give us hopefully some angles on how to process what we're going through and strategies for managing what's ahead. So thank you all for joining us. If you have questions, Norm said, feel free to just either ask them as he's going along, or we can certainly post them in the chat. Otherwise, if you'd hit the mute button on your device, just so that we can hear the presentation as clearly as we can. All right, I think that's all of our housekeeping, so I will quit talking and leave it to you, Norm.
Yeah, and if I can, once I get the slides going, if I can rely on you to monitor the chat, because it won't be as easy for me to see it.
Definitely.
And let me know if anybody has any questions. I'd be happy to stop.
Sure.
Well, thanks for being here, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you this evening. I'm Norm Kittleson. I work for Health West in Muskegon. I am a case manager on the substance use disorder team. Naturally, I think you probably understand what that entails. I work with people with addiction issues, and all the people that I work with have coexisting conditions, so there's also some underlying mental health conditions. In a previous life, I was a special education teacher for many, many years in the area. In addition to my job at Health West, I also work part-time at Blue Lake Public Radio. I am also the Chief Financial Officer for the White Lake Fire Authority, and I serve on the White Lake Library Board, which is how Virginia asked me to do this, and I was more than happy to do it. So, and the presentation I'm going to present tonight is something that we're presenting at Health West. We put together this presentation, and we're sharing with various community groups, and of course the staff at Health West and county employees, because it's really, really important to be able to take care of yourself, especially these days. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or jump on. I'm happy to stop and answer any questions, and I'll hang around for a while afterwards and answer any questions that you have. I'll also be sharing some links to Health West programs on the slides that are related to the issue that we're talking about. So there'll be a lot of resources available. So let me go ahead and get the screen sharing going here. Hopefully it'll work. All right, can everybody see that? All right, great. Let me get the play mode going. There we are. All right. So the first slide says not today. And so the reason that we have this up there is because, I don't know your personal story or what your family's experience has been. So, if today's not the best day for you to hear some things that might be a little bit challenging, then that's okay. You can come back and watch the recording. You can get, linked up with Health West. There'll be some information about how to find the program. So yeah, if at some point you just feel like this is a little bit too much, that's fine. We want you to feel safe, to feel comfortable. I'm not going to throw anything out there that's, really bad, but, everybody has their own different reactions to things. We want to be sensitive to that. So the presentation will be pretty quick, probably, 30 minutes or so. And I'll leave time for questions. If you want a deeper dive, head to the Eventbrite page at healthwest.net. And there's all kinds of trainings and events that we have going on there. So there it is. Health West classes and groups on their Facebook page, Eventbrite, and healthwest.net. And why is it a blank? Okay. So here we are. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Oh, wait a minute, why did that? Okay, hold on a second. I think it's just running and I don't want it to do that. So give me a second. I am going to get out of this full screen mode, and I'm going to just load the slides up individually is what I'm going to do. So hang on just a second. Let me back up here. All right, so here we are. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. I don't need to tell you that. Things have been really crazy. On top of the regular stress that we have in our lives, it's, I'm 62 years old. I've never seen anything like this, not even close, I think about my parents. They were born in 1922 and 1923 respectively. So, you think about the first 20 something years of their lives, that they had the Depression and then World War II. So, I mean, they went through a lot of hardship, and here I am, this guy who grew up in a really comfortable existence, and all of a sudden I'm faced with all this. It's been really hard. And I didn't have to go through 20 something years of stuff like this. So, I can't imagine, my grandparents were all born in the late 1800s. So what did they go through? They went through they went through World War I, the 1918 pandemic, the Great Depression, World War II. So, really, when you take a bigger picture, there's a lot that's gone on before us that we haven't had a chance to experience. So this is something new to us. And it's been really, really hard. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The economy's been part of the problem too. The pandemic has affected the economy. The economy was rebounding. It wasn't great for everybody yet, but this has certainly added to the problem. And economic issues are always a big stressor. This summer, we've seen a lot of racial unrest, focusing on topics of, injustice, and whether or not you're directly affected by that can still be stressful. Of course, it's been a pretty volatile political season. Don't need to tell you that. I'm not going to, get into that too much. I don't really care what your politics are. We've all been affected by it, and it's all been a source of stress for us. So here are some statistics. In June of this year, 11% of American adults seriously considered suicide. Seriously considered suicide. The above rate was highest among 18 to 24-year-olds. And these are just general statistics now. 1 in 4 school-age young people have considered suicide. Symptoms of depression have quadrupled in the same time period compared to last year. Symptoms of anxiety have tripled compared to last year. And 40% of Americans reported some mental health issue or substance abuse related to the pandemic. So, things are different, but, you're not alone in this. I mean, we're all in this together. And, working for Health West, and as I said, I work on the substance use disorder team, and it's been a rough week for us. We've had, in the last couple of weeks, several people who had managed to put together some pretty good periods of extended sobriety have relapsed. And, we had 2 people die of drug overdoses within the last 4 months. And these were all people who were doing relatively well before that. So I think, obviously, this is taking a toll on people. And the more stress you're under, the more it's going to affect you. This is from Mental Health America. The number of people looking for help with anxiety and depression has skyrocketed during the pandemic. And that's for sure. I mean, working for Health West, I see this, and, we're getting a lot more people walking in the door. We've got more people who are asking for services. We have more people who are already receiving services who need more intensive services. So there's no doubt about it. Things are really hard for people, and, it's starting to show, the cracks are starting to show. I'm actually looking at 2 screens here, so give me just a second here. All right. So, do suicide rates increase due to epidemics and pandemics? Well, that's not exactly true. It would appear that suicide rates decrease a bit during an epidemic or a pandemic. And on our Eventbrite page, we have some classes that discuss this in detail. So if you're interested in, kind of getting a deeper view into that topic, you can certainly avail yourself of those resources. A study of the 2003 SARS epidemic in Hong Kong showed that there was a 30% increase in suicide among those 65 and older, which is a really pretty interesting statistic, because a bigger concern is the economic impact, in relation to mental health and suicide. So it's not so much just the pandemic itself, it's the economic effect that it's having. So people are losing their jobs, they're not able to make their payments, they're really worried, they've blown through all their savings, everything is going south on them, and that's really what's driving it. It's not so much the pandemic itself. To learn more about the research into what impact the economy has had on mental health, again, we have our Eventbrite page, and you can register for Trying Times, social media, and suicide prevention. It's a great program. Michael Pine, who's one of the guys that I work with, and he's the guy that put this together, he's really dialed into the suicide prevention world, and he does great programs on that. So if you're interested in that, check it out on the Eventbrite page. For every 1 point increase in unemployment, there's a 1 to 1.6 increase in deaths of despair, meaning overdose, suicide, alcohol-related deaths. So, unemployment, it's devastating for people, not only in terms of their, their earnings, but just in their mental health. So we've also had, a great deal of, hang on a second. The racial unrest this summer over racial disparities, and interestingly, there was also a great deal of racial unrest during the Spanish flu outbreak of 1918. And this outbreak, this virus outbreak, has brought to the forefront some of the disparities in healthcare, as people of color have been dying in greater numbers than their white counterparts. So there's a history of trauma, sort of this historical trauma that people of color experience. There's generational trauma that runs through many families, regardless of race or any other demographic concern. There's feelings of marginalization that are historic and also immediate. And then, there's systemic racism that causes problems for not just the people who are, direct victims of it, but for us too. Those of us who don't necessarily see that in a direct way on a day-to-day basis. When other people are suffering, we all suffer. So it's been estimated that between 75,000 and 100,000 African Americans die every year due to disparities within the healthcare field. And that's based on various research projects that go back to the 1960s. So this is nothing new. I mean, we've known about this for a very long time. And what is it that our job is? What's our job? So as a community, we need to look out for each other. We all have reacted differently to this crazy time. Some of us are okay. Some of us are really struggling. So, what is the task of health agencies like Health West and others during this pandemic? And that is, hang on a second, sorry. So our task is to enhance the community's ability to manage fear and anxiety, especially in vulnerable groups. Now, this does not mean hiding facts or keeping information away from the public, but we need to be well informed about this stuff. And Amy and I were kind of talking about this before the meeting. You want to know what's going on, but you have to be really careful about how much information you're taking in, what kind of information you're taking in, how that information is framed, and what you're doing with it. So COVID-19 presents, a lot of mental health and other risks for the general public. So, I don't need to tell you too much about this. I mean, we know how things are impacting us, but, social isolation from, your family, your friends, your spiritual community, some of your normal support systems, Stresses for healthcare and social care staff. I mean, you know, we're really stressed out at Health West. Most of us are working from home. We've got a skeleton crew down at the office. So far, we've done a really good job of managing the health of the staff, but you know, we do have people getting sick now. And so, you know, they can't come into work for a couple weeks at least. And so, you know, it puts the extra stress on those of us who haven't gotten sick yet. We've got to spend more time covering for them. There's been a big increase in domestic violence. This is a real serious issue because, you know, people are stuck in domestic violence situations. They really can't get out of them now, right? I mean, shelters are full. There's a risk of contracting the disease if you go to a shelter, right? What are you going to do? Substance use disorders, we've already talked about that. Those are on the rise. Amy and I were talking about the interrupted education that kids are experiencing right now. Bereavement and complicated grief. What do you do now? You can't have a standard sort of memorial service anymore. So how do you process grief for people that you've lost? And, you know, there's media reporting, and this is something else that Amy and I were talking about before the meeting. It's like, you know, you just feel overwhelmed. The news is so negative, but then the way that it's framed and where you're getting your news from, it can really add to the stress. And there's also a stigma for people who are recovering from COVID-19. I mean, it can be a real problem. I mean, you know, people don't want to be around you. They're afraid of you. I personally haven't been through that, but I know people that I work with who are recovering from it, and they've experienced this in their personal lives. So it's a real thing. Now, talking about self-care, you know, the important thing to remember is it's not all about bubble baths and chocolate-covered cherries. It's often really hard work, and it takes commitment. And we don't want to beat ourselves up about it, but instead just start to put one foot in front of the other, okay? And you learn by doing. So, you know, don't learn by reading. I mean, you have to read a little bit, but you don't learn by talking. We already talked too much. You learn by doing. And if you're gonna talk, you know, talk while you're doing it. In the doing, you learn what things you're missing and things that are stopping you from taking care of yourself. And you learn that how there are steps that you don't know or haven't figured out yet. If you don't start, you're never gonna know what you don't know, and you're never gonna know what you can do. So when you take action to fill those gaps, that's when you start learning, and that's when you really move forward. So the first step, you know, write down your fears. If you're having trouble doing, fear is stopping you. What are you afraid of? What do you think you're not good enough for, right? I mean, there's a lot of us who suffer from this sort of fundamental sense that we're not good enough, and it's really hard to kind of overcome that sometimes. What belief do you have that's keeping you from doing something? Write these down. Put them on paper. That's an action step that you can take, and it's a really important one to get started with. So now do away your fears. So you beat the fears by doing it. You know, you're afraid of writing, just try 2 minutes of it. That's a small amount, not a big commitment, not scary. Afraid of not doing well at a language and you want to learn a language, you know, just listen to a couple minutes of Spanish music, maybe watch a couple minutes of Spanish movie, podcast. You know, how bad can you be at doing something for 2 minutes, right? By doing something in really small steps, we learn that these fears that we have about doing these things aren't really true, you know, that we can do them and not completely fail. I was talking with Amy beforehand, and I was a special education teacher for many years. And there's a concept called learned helplessness. And it's when students have failed so much over the years that they've just given up. Because, you know, why should I take the chance on feeling this pain of not being successful? The easiest way around that is to not try it in the first place. So the way that the strategy that's really effective in helping students overcome that is to give them little tiny tasks, just little things that you know that they can do. And then they do this one little thing, and then they get a little bit of self-confidence, and you scaffold that and you build that up. And then eventually, hopefully, they're going to be able to do more things on their own. And that's the same thing here, right? If you're afraid of doing something, just take little bites, bite off a little bit, try a little bit first. And then you see that you can do it, and then just keep increasing the time. See failure as a learning tool. I mean, nobody wants to fail, because a lot of us have been conditioned to think that if we fail, it's because we're fundamentally unworthy and we're bad people, but it's not true. Failure is an indication of something we can learn, and it's a necessary step to learning. If you didn't fail, it means that you already knew how to do everything, and none of us know how to do everything or everything perfectly, right? And if you suffer from crippling perfectionism, like I do and a lot of other people do, it can be really hard, right? Well, I'm not going to try this because I'm not going to be able to do it perfectly, and that means I'm a bad person. Well, that's a lie. That's just a fantasy that we've made up in our heads. So, just try it. You're probably not going to be great at it. It's like learning how to ride a bike. We all love doing it, but none of us were good at it when we started. And you have to fail a few times before you get good at something. So, failing 10 times isn't bad. It's great because you're learning, you're adapting, right? And adjust, do some more. The process is act, fail, learn, adjust, then act again. So once you've failed at something, figure out how you can adjust and then try again. This next attempt might be better, maybe not. If it's not, just keep tweaking it until it works, right? There's no plan that can tell you exactly how to do something without failure. No map is exactly right. You have to just take the action and adjust as you go. And so the key is that it's a process, right? And you have to go through that process. And fear is not the determining factors in our lives. It doesn't tell us how our lives will go. It's just that little voice in our heads that's trying to get us away from discomfort, right? Nobody wants to feel uncomfortable. And so, when we feel a little discomfort, that fear kicks in and it tells us, run away, don't do this, don't even try. But we can learn that discomfort isn't horrible. It's the feeling of exploring new territory, climbing up to that next level, right? So what do we do to take care of ourselves? A steady diet of suffering and trauma, it's just not good for anybody, right? So we have to take care of each other, and that starts with taking care of yourself, right? So create a self-care plan. Write it down. It's a dream until you write it down. Once you write it down, then it becomes a goal. But the key is to make sure that you're writing it down first. So think about the following questions. What will I do to take care of myself? Keep it simple. Eat right, sleep right, get some exercise. Put these things into your daily calendar. I am going to exercise at a certain time today. If you don't make that commitment, it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to go to bed at this hour. I'm not going to stay up all night and doom scroll, on my phone. And, make sure you're eating right. It's really easy when you're busy to not get good nutrition. I used to coach athletes, and one of the things that I would always tell them is, don't eat anything that comes in a bag, especially one that gets handed to you through a car window. It might be quick, it might be convenient, it might fill you up for a minute, but it's not going to make you feel good in the long run. Okay. So consider the following questions also. Who are people that I can call on after a rough day? You've got to build a support network around yourself. Identify those trusted people around you that you can talk to about the day's stressors, right? And a lot of the people that I work with don't have a lot of people in their lives that they can do this with. So I'm that person for them. hopefully you all have some people in your lives that you can do this with. So try to do that, make a list of people that you can call on, build your support network. Who do I reach out to if I need even more help? If I become overwhelmed, who are my go-to people? My loved ones, my doctor, friends, anybody. And I'm sure that we've all been feeling that way lately, right? So when you start thinking seriously about your self-care, you have to start thinking about what activities do you want, or do you need to do to ease the stress, right? For me, being physically active is one. I have some hobbies that I engage in that I really like, and they've been really, really important to me to help me get through this time. Now that it's darker, it's kind of hard to get out after work, but there are still things that I can do that help me relax. Get other people involved. I mean, I understand now we can't really do that face to face, but you can call people, you can set up a little Zoom meeting or FaceTime, whatever works for you, right? And if intoxicants have been your go-to self-care plan, you might want to rethink that. I mean, sure, who hasn't said, I'm going to have a glass of wine or whatever, just to kind of unwind a little bit. But if that's becoming your numero uno way to unwind, you probably want to rethink that. It's not a really healthy strategy. So remember that everybody's self-care plan is going to be different. That's okay. What works for me isn't going to work for you. Maybe some of the things that I do will work for you. Maybe some of the things that you do work for me. But don't think that because somebody else is doing something, that's what you need to be doing. You need to think about what's good for you and make that happen. And equally important, don't be afraid to ask for help. Reach out to support people in your life. Talk about self-care methods that may have helped them and what you're hoping to achieve. Find those trusted people. Say, hey, look, I'm really stressed out. I want to get better. What are some things you've been doing? And this is where I want to go with my self-care. What's been working for you? And are you willing to work with me to help me and offer to help them too, right? Because it's a mutual aid society. So here's some different domains that you want to pay attention to. Your physical, right? Making sure that you're taking care of your body. The psychological, intellectual part of it is very important as well. Emotional, make sure that you're taking care of your emotional side, your relationships, your spiritual connection with people. I know it's kind of hard for spiritual communities these days, but there are ways to stay connected. And even if you're not able to go to, a particular place of worship, I think it's a good opportunity for us to sort of dive into what's really important to us in terms of spirituality, right? For me, being in a certain place with certain people isn't as important as it is for me to understand that I have a core set of values, and it's, take the opportunity to maybe just kind of dive into that and explore that a little bit more. There's plenty of online resources. I mean, I look at online stuff all the time. It has to do with spiritual development, and I get as much out of that as I would, being in a group with other people. Do I like being with other people? Yeah, I'm a social creature, but right now I know I can't do it. The workplace is another environment that can be kind of stressful. At Health West, we're keeping a skeleton crew. I mean, we only have one person. We have 5 people on my team. There's only one person in there on any given day right now, because we're just trying to keep it safe. That means that a lot of us have to pick up work for others, and that can add to stress. But what are you going to do to take care of yourself in the workplace, right? What are the things that you can do at work to create sort of a little self-care environment? We have some walking treadmills, walking desks, treadmill desks, I guess they're called. I go down there and I work on there a little bit. If I've got the time, I'll go for a walk outside. There are some other people in the building, so I'll take a walk around and just kind of say hi to people that I know, socialize a little bit. What are you doing in the community? I know, again, it's really hard when we can't connect with people, but there are things that you can do in the community that make a difference. So find some things to, volunteer opportunities. Really important thing that I learned from some very wise and sage individuals was that the best way to get out of your own head is to help somebody else, especially somebody who's not in as good a position as you are, right? So doing something for somebody else is a good way for you to kind of get out of your own head and forget your own problems. What are you going to do to take care of yourself financially? There's plenty of financial gurus out there, Dave Ramsey or, whoever you want to find, but there are plenty of good programs to help you get your finances in order. So if you need help with that, dive in there, make it happen. So here's a bigger question, right? You're working on your self-care plan. You're trying to do all these things. Nothing seems to be working. So when is it time to say, I need some real help? So a mental health illness is a diagnosable illness that affects a person's thinking, emotional state, and behavior. And it disrupts that person's ability to work or attend school, carry out daily activities, or engage in satisfying relationships. So, if this has been going on for, more than 4 to 6 weeks, where you've had, a real serious problem with this stuff, it's time to get some help. When I saw this statistic, the first time I attended this program, when Michael was doing it for the staff, this really blew my mind. In America, most people wait an average of 10 years before seeking help for a mental health concern. 10 years, that's a long time to suffer. Mental health problems tend to be self-reinforcing. It's kind of like a negative feedback loop, right? So think about how much negative feedback you're getting in 10 years. So if you're suffering and you think you need help, don't wait 10 years. Don't wait 10 weeks. Give a call. Call your primary care physician. Call your insurance provider. Ask about mental health services. Call Health West. Call me. I'll help get you connected with services. I'm happy to do it. And here's a helpline you can call, 231-722-HELP. That's a pretty easy number to remember. So if things are bad, pick up the phone, ask for help. In my own personal story, I had a really hard time asking for help. That was one of the things that I really had to learn to do in my own, recovery and wellness journey. I was the smartest guy around. I knew how to take care of everything. I could fix everything. I didn't need anybody's help. I was certainly glad to tell you what was wrong with you, but you didn't get to tell me what was wrong with me, So what I've learned is that it's okay to ask for help. I have people that I know I can call and say, hey, what's going on? Is this thought pattern I'm having? Does this make sense to you? Or, here's something I want to do. Does this sound like a good idea to you? Because my reality radar is not very well calibrated. So I need to check with people and see how it's going, right? So don't be afraid to ask for help. There's another thing that Amy and I were kind of touching on before we got into the meeting tonight, and that's social media use and how it affects our mental health. This is a crazy statistic. Look at this, I'm not saying that, correlation is causation, and I'm always very careful about making that connection. But does this mean anything? Maybe, maybe not. There's lots of other factors that go into these things, but we see a lot of suicide rates increasing at the same time as the use of social media. So maybe if you're not feeling good, maybe stay off of social media. Another big, I hate to say it's a buzzword these days, but something that's really kind of come into its own over the last 10 years is the idea of mindfulness. And it's a really important practice. And we're putting together some programs at Health West. We have a regular Tuesday mindfulness program that we're running for the staff right now, which is great because we have a lot of people on our staff who aren't as familiar with mindfulness as some others of us are. And they're finding it really helpful. So hopefully we're going to be able to roll this out to the community once we've sort of beta tested it on ourselves. But there are tons of mindfulness phone apps out there, online programs. And mindfulness doesn't mean, sitting quietly for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and leading a monastic existence. For me, it means giving myself some quiet time every day where I can sit down and observe what's going on in my mind. I'm not trying to like eliminate all thoughts, because that's never going to happen. Trust me, I've been meditating for a while. It's never going to happen. But what it allows me to do is check in with myself every day and say, okay, what's the predominant thought pattern that I'm having today? What's something that's coming up in my head? And if I can take that sort of third-party objective view of what's going on in my mind, I find that it helps give me a cleaner, clearer perspective on what's going on. And maybe I'm not going to get so caught up in some of this stuff. So I love this. This is absolutely great. Here's my wish for you and every other child, woman, and man on the face of the earth. Spend 1 week saying only kind, caring things to yourself. Say thank you at least 10 times an hour. Direct 5 toward yourself, 5 toward the world at large. Compliment yourself and others each time an effort is made. Notice all the wonderful qualities and characteristics about yourself and those around you. 1 week, and you'll never go back. And your whole life will be one glorious meditation. This is really hard for me. I have this this really sort of fundamental sense of unworthiness, and it's very hard for me to do this sort of thing. But I've worked really hard on it over the past number of years, and I'm getting better at it. At least now I recognize that I do this, that I have this really bad negative self-talk, and when I feel it welling up, I can at least acknowledge it. I know it's probably never going to go away, but now what I can do is I can say to myself, you know what? I know you. You're that crummy little guy who likes to crawl out and make me miserable, and you don't get to drive the bus today. You can sit in the back of the bus and enjoy the ride, but I'm going to drive the bus today, because when you drive the bus, it usually goes into the ditch. People get hurt. I lose things. I don't want that anymore in my life. So I know you're there. I acknowledge you. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I don't have to pay attention to it. But, that requires a lot of work for me. I have to really work on that really hard all the time. So I love this, and I hope some of you are going to be able to do that better than I can. All right. So again, if you think you need help, call 231-722-HELP. Suicide Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. And we have this great quote by Leonard Cohen here: love is the only engine of survival. So just, love each other, love yourself, help other people, help yourself. And if you think you need help, ask for it. But take some steps, put that plan together, take some action, write it down. It's easier said than done, but hopefully something you've seen here tonight is going to help spur you to take that action if you haven't started that already. So that's about it. And I will gladly hang out for a little while if anybody has any questions, or, if you want to talk to me privately, that's fine. I can share my phone number if you want to talk to me, outside of the meeting. I'll give you my work number. I've got my phone right here. You can call me, happy to do it. So that's that. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you tonight. I hope you found some meaning in it, and just be well.
Thank you so much, Norm. This was really great. I know I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm sitting here writing down notes the whole time you were talking. So good information. I'm looking forward to sharing it with our extended audience who wasn't able to join us tonight. Can I bug you for a quick question?
Sure,
just kind of general. This is just something that when you were talking earlier, you were talking about the importance of sort of the self-care plan and all those things and writing it down. I know that's sort of one of those things I never really think about. Like, I don't think, oh, well, I need to write down, I need to schedule in that time I think it's partially because it feels very almost like self-indulgent. How do you get over that? Or I guess, what are your thoughts on how you get to the point where it's like self-care is not self-indulgent, it is a necessary requirement, especially these days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's why I like that slide that said it's not all about bubble baths and, eating, chocolate bonbons. Um, that's a really common idea of what self-care is. And, maybe we need that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a great phrase that I heard, and I'm sure many of you have probably heard it before. When you're on an airplane and they're giving the flight safety instructions, they tell you that if the cabin should lose pressure and the oxygen masks drop down, put your own mask on before attempting to help someone else. And the whole idea here is that if you aren't in good, healthy condition, then you're really not going to be able to take care of anybody else, right? So making sure that you're taking care of yourself is vitally important if you care at all about taking care of other people. Because if you're not in good physical and mental condition, then you're not going to be able to help anybody else, regardless of how altruistic you feel or how much of an obligation you feel to your kids, right? Or your family. You're not going to be as effective. Maybe you can do it, but you won't be as effective. So that's probably the best analogy I can give you in terms of helping people overcome that idea. Well, this is really self-indulgent, and I really got to think about other people. Yeah, well, you do. You got to think about other people. But again, unless you are in good shape, you're not going to be able to help those people to the degree that you probably want to, right? And I don't know, I kind of think that, our whole purpose here on the planet is to help other people. I mean, we're all just walking each other home, as Ram Dass would say, right?
It's a good analogy. I appreciate that. Thanks.
No, you're welcome. So I did put my name and phone number in the chat there. So again, if anybody wants to reach out and talk to me personally, that's fine. That's my work number. I usually have my phone with me. So if you give me a call, if you don't get me directly, leave a message and I will gladly call you back.
All right. Any other questions, comments before we let everybody go relax and take care? Hopefully have some time to indulge in, I want to say indulge. I'm not going to use that word. I was going to say enjoy some self-care. There we go.
Well, I think it looked like Nancy was trying to say something. I don't know if you're muted or not,
Oops.
Nancy. Did you have a question or you want to say something? Well, I can't hear you for whatever reason. It doesn't look like you're muted, but maybe you have the microphone. Oh, there we go. Okay, got you now.
I just want to thank you. This was very interesting.
Well, you're welcome.
Uh-huh.
Thanks. And it's good to see you, Nancy, I got to say.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. I hear you on the radio all the time.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, well, and seriously, and I'm not saying this to, toot our own horns or anything, but I can't tell you how many times we've gotten calls at the station from people who've said that, what we do there is providing them with this sort of oasis. And it's a way for them to indulge in a form of self-care, to listen to some really beautiful, soothing music. Mm-hmm. It helps them deal with what's going on. So, hey, if listening to beautiful music or whatever kind of music you like helps you, do it. I know it helps me a lot,
Well, I have to tell you that I used to listen to the news in the car, and I stopped listening to the news in the car, and I only listen to Blue Lake Radio in the car now, and it has really helped my sanity a lot. So.
Well, thanks. And I always pass these comments on to, my fellow announcers and the brass there, because, people really need to hear that. You go on the air and you're doing your thing and you just kind of wonder, okay, is anybody out there? I don't know if anybody's listening or not. I'm picking CDs from the library and throwing them out there and telling people what they are. But, when you get that phone call and somebody says, hey, that was really beautiful, thank you, that really makes a difference, So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're kind of at the end of our discussion then for tonight. Thank you so much, Norm, for doing this. It's greatly
pleasure.
appreciated and needed.
Okay, Sonia, this is all finished.
All right. Well, everyone have a good rest
Thank
of your
you.
evening. Take care, and we will have the recording available if there's anything that you want to take a look at again later, or if you want to pass it along to friends, family, anyone that you think would benefit from this information.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks for the
Bye.
opportunity. I really appreciate it. We'll see you around.
What's this one about?
He works at Help West,
Oh, yeah.
suicide prevention, and just take care of yourself, you know,
Uh-huh.
help other people when you can. I mean, obviously, you know, you can't